Hi, I'm Mara Webster with In Creative Company, and today I'm so excited to be talking about the wonderful film Armand. I'm joined today by writer and director Halfdan Ullmann Tøndel and actor and executive producer Renate Reinsve. And Halfdan, starting with you, I wanted to talk about the initial idea for this film, which started with the idea of a character for Renate and living with the idea of someone who could be very strong emotionally, but also very manipulative and then very vulnerable and helpless the next minute. And I was interested in how coming up with the emotions of a character first kind of then sparked into the larger concept of the story that you're telling on screen.
That's a good question. I guess I used a couple of months. I had like this idea pool of ideas in my notebook, and I tried to figure out in which universe this kind of character where we could take advantage of her traits as best as possible. And I tried to write actually a few different drafts in a few different universes, but which I didn't feel really explore the full potential of this character. And then I heard this story about two 6-year-old boys on a camping trip, and it was only a 15-second story where one of the boys had something adult-like to the other, and with the exploding theme of parents and children and how they relate to each other, in conflict and with other parents in school and things like that. I've really felt it was perfect for Renate's character, and I was yeah, it felt very good.
Absolutely. And Renata, you were so involved in this project, I believe, for about 7 years, and you got to see those different drafts of the script throughout. And I've heard you say that each time that you got a new draft of the script, that the emotions would feel more and more intense. And I was interested in how reading all the different drafts and kind of seeing that journey helped you in kind of uncovering this character, because there's so much underneath the surface with her throughout the entire film.
Yeah, I was a little bit scared the first time I read her, but I was so impressed of the world that you had created and also the nuances of the different characters together and the kind of what's the English word? Kind of just like this web of these conversations and these characters on top of each other. And then yeah, every time the new draft came, you warned me that she would have even more of these traits. And of course, as an actress, it's scary because it's a lot of prejudices against actresses and also like the manipulation and that you're not sincere. So it was really difficult to go into that. But and it is a scary character, but I really, yeah.
Halfdan, I also love kind of not even just the fact that you've used this school as a singular setting, but the feeling that it kind of evokes, because there's that idea that I think everyone remembers being a child and those moments where you'd be in school in the evening or after hours, and it's almost unsettling because there should be this energy and this laughter and all these kids running around. And so I wanted to ask about kind of just the emotion and the feeling that you wanted to evoke throughout this school with just having a handful of people there in the evening after hours.
Yeah, I think you describe it good. I remember sleeping over at my school when I was 12 years old, and it was a really, really old school. And I remember as a kid being really struck by by the mysterious kind of feeling in the school after hours. And it was so silent compared to what it was like in the day. And it was almost like the 100-year-old soul of the building came alive, and the ghost from the past was running around in the hallways. And this kind of spooky, mysterious, but also very palpable feeling of the school was something I wanted to get in the film, and it was that was the feeling of the school was very like clear for me from the very beginning of writing as well. And once I decided to do the whole film in one location, which I decided quite early, I was just like struck by so much inspiration on how to do it with all the different rooms. I have myself been working in a primary school for many years, and I have been closing the school and going into this classroom where the projector is still on, and the feeling of the blue even though it was not as blue as in the film, it was still the same feeling. So this was something I really thought was a lot of I found a lot of enjoyment in and inspiration in that.
Renate, you've also described how you're very analytical and you kind of love diving into the details of characters. And, you know, particularly going back to how many versions of the script you got the chance to read, I was really curious what your process was in how you would kind of dive into analyzing scenes, because what's so wonderful about this film is there's all these little kind of like half details in the dialogue, but then it's the subtext of the performance that gives us everything else that's not being said.
Yeah, I love working in contrast and working very systematically through the script, with always trying to think about something at the same time that I act something else, and then like create this triangle that are components against each other, and try to, like, in the time where I sit alone with the script, just like create these as much as possible. And then, of course, in a way that I can be flexible to change them when I'm on set, and just create possibilities for the situations. And then, of course, the most important thing is when you're on set and you change things and you try to create her one more time, kind of together. But yeah, I love that little nerdy face of sitting alone with the script.
I also wanted to ask you both about some of the rehearsal period beforehand, because I know that it was important to you as kind of a director and a filmmaker, but Renate, that's not something that you love, because you love to kind of save the emotion for once you're filming on camera. So you would kind of intentionally would hold back a little bit, and just how you kind of found that middle ground together of getting what you needed out of rehearsals, but not putting too much forward.
Yeah. I think for me, this particular character, it was important because she had to lose control. So I wanted to surprise myself and actually be able to lose control on set. And it's easier when you're really scared of not making something, or you haven't rehearsed and you actually get scared. So for other characters, it's good to rehearse, but for this specifically, I was very scared of rehearsing.
Yeah, you were.
Yeah.
So for me, it was, you know, finding the right balance, because some of the other actors really like to rehearse. They come from the theater as well as you do, but they were very like used to rehearse in a full scale more. And also because there was so much dialogue, I was super dependent on actually seeing the material being played out a little bit before shooting, because we also shot the whole film in 21 days, which is very little. So I needed to also see if this actually works, you know, in a way. So we had a lot of scenes where she is playing super dryly, the others
or even sometimes went out of the room.
Yeah, that's
like, this is because they were such a force.
Yeah,
the teachers like in a panel, and they were like, oh, this is great, but I can't.
I remember that really well.
Yeah,
I remember that really well.
Yeah.
This one of when she sits alone with the school people, without the other parents, and we were supposed to rehearse that scene. And the first sentence when the principal says to Elizabeth, "You need to understand the gravity of this situation," she said, "I need to go out. I just need to
It
go."
was so good. Like, it was such a good situation.
Yeah.
It was so strong.
Yeah.
So it was.
So
Yeah.
she went home, and I played Elizabeth for the rest of that scene. Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, because they needed to rehearse.
I'm sorry.
No, that was okay. It's good that you say what you want.
Yeah.
I love that. You know, and in the writing and the directing, you know, obviously you have this large story at the center of what happened between these two kids, and the parents and the teachers discussing it and trying to figure out how to move forward. But there's also all these kind of other tiny details of how do we perceive something. You know, you have this fire alarm where everyone says, oh, it's faulty, we can ignore it. But also, if you suddenly perceive it that actually it is working and it is telling us the right thing, then we have to evacuate. You know, you have a teacher who's having all these nosebleeds that's maybe innocuous, and then someone casually says, I knew someone who got all these nosebleeds and actually it was leukemia. And what made you want to kind of like interweave these other details that can be very subjective at the same time as the larger narrative plot point?
Oh, I love that question. I mean, those things are really like emphasizing some of the gray areas that I try to also explore in this film. You know, the incident in itself is like, is this play or is it abuse? So I wanted a lot of the situations to be like that. For example, the nosebleed, is it just a regular nosebleed, or is it leukemia? Is it something very serious, or is it something completely innocent? So I wanted a lot of the situations in the film to be between those two extremes, really, and that we were kind of exploring it in the gray area. And for example, the fire alarm, it's also like, I have a broken fire alarm inside myself, you know. So, and it's difficult to say if it's real or not sometimes, and it's keep yelling and yelling and yelling and ringing, and I can't even tell if it's real. And that was something I thought was just like a very good symbolic actually for being a human sometimes, and also in the school, you know, in the end, when we think it's fixed, the fire alarm, but we cannot be completely sure, but she's still running out and everybody's running out, but we can't be completely sure if it's actually fixed, you know. So yeah.
And with your character, Elizabeth, I wanted to ask a little bit about when she first comes into the school and those early scenes, because she has no idea why she's been called into the school and what she's going to be confronted with in terms of that information. And I thought it was so interesting to see just like the stillness and the quietness as she's kind of processing everything before she starts to go, wait, I'm kind of under attack here and I need to defend myself. And you go to all the other emotions. And even just the physical choice of not really moving that much says so much compared to the later movement in the character. And so what kind of led to the specific choices that you wanted to make right at the beginning when she's being given all this information?
Yeah, it's a very good observation. And we talked about it very early that you wanted very specific details for her, especially when she's introduced in the movie, that she's to find ways to put her nervousness out, and that she is, when she doesn't know, she is at her most stressed. And when the kind of the whole catastrophe breaks out, then she becomes calm. And yeah, kind of like she's even trying to make the conflict bigger in a way, or trying to throw out something that makes the conflict bigger because she's more comfortable in conflicts. So that was important to put in her body, that stress. And she is a really physical character the whole way through. I was surprised by how physical she was.
There's also the aspect that when she first comes in, she's there by herself, and the other kid, both of his parents are present. So she's already, in a sense, outnumbered. And then they have one teacher, but then they have two of the other staff come into the room. And so that kind of feels like it really escalates everything, because now she feels like she's under attack from 5 people. And so for both of you, how did you feel like that really changed the stakes and changed the emotions of the character?
Yeah, because for me, it was important that the conflict kind of escalated without any new allegations really coming into the show, so to speak. I mean, because, for example, the principal, he's a leader that only wants to show an illusion of leadership without taking any responsibility himself. So he's starting to get panicked when things doesn't go too very smoothly in the first meeting with only the teacher. So then he feels like logically that maybe he needs to show some illusion of a leadership, but that only leads to that the conflict escalates in a way, and he doesn't have all the facts, you know, straight, and just comes in and making it worse. And for that first scene when they come in, I was really inspired by Jeanne d'Arc by Dreyer, which, you know, is really one person being surrounded by new and different allegations from all, you know, from every side. And yeah, I thought it was something interesting with this overwhelming kind of stream of new allegations just coming and coming and coming, and making it more and more difficult for Elizabeth to defend herself.
Was that the same for you?
Yeah, and she really is trapped. It's very claustrophobic because she can't get away from their truth. They have decided in a way, and they're very judgmental towards her. So I think in her last experience being with her late husband, the Thomas, that's dead, and that abusive relationship, and her being an actor, and people wanting kind of to they're curious and want a piece of her in a good way, but it becomes kind of abusive in a way. So I think she's very alert to situations and how she's judged in the first place. Yeah.
It also feels like there's so many interesting details in terms of the subtext because of the history that she has with this other couple. You know, this isn't parents that she doesn't know very well. Their kid has come to her house dozens of times, even just in the last few months, you know, and to have that history that you have with someone suddenly completely flipped on its head is
Yeah.
quite jarring. And I just wanted to ask you both a little bit about kind of finding that history and how you feel like that played into the emotion of all of these scenes even more.
I think it was important for the stakes of the story, and also like the motives of the characters, maybe especially the Sarah character, that she that we had this character that both of them had a very strong relationship to, but in complete opposite. They had complete opposite feelings. You know, Sarah was idolizing her brother, but kind of maybe knew on like deep down that he was not the best guy, but kind of ignored it.
Because she has the same traits.
Because she has the same traits, and Elizabeth also, you know, everybody's talking about how great this guy is, but really he was maybe not. He was a quite, you know, not a good person. And I kind of liked, you know, how they had so different perspectives, and it was so important for them to fight for their own perspective, and without maybe listening to the other.
Renate, did you feel like your character was kind of questioning herself a lot? Because there's the conversation that she has with the other dad where she's kind of saying like, I worry that my son may have seen some of the things that were going on in my relationship. And, you know, you kind of see that doubt of like, how did I potentially play a part in what may have happened?
Yeah, and I think if you're if you lack self-awareness in some parts of you, I think also you are in denial, and then this situation and conflict also opens up some pain that she hasn't been in contact with I think, which I think is important for her from the outside, but for her to be in that moment, she's kind of losing her own perspective and actually questioning herself, and it's of course extremely painful and very confusing, but I guess it's good for everyone to be in that process, but very painful.
And Halfdan, kind of as the tension and the emotion of the film really builds, I feel like you do so much with the camera and the lighting choices and just kind of building this sense of tension and claustrophobia in different ways. What was that pre-production process and really finding the different ways that you wanted to visually build the tension and claustrophobia as much as the emotion?
Yeah, we kind of imagined the film as a funnel. So it started quite open and light, and then we go in, you know, into the funnel, and then out in the rain again when we're out of the funnel. So that was how we kind of imagined the visuality of the film. So it gets more and more claustrophobic, darker and darker. Like aesthetically, we wanted the film to be a mix between dynamic, quite choreographed shots and a lot of close-ups. We were really inspired by In the Mood for Love, how they visualized the geography in the apartment, because we didn't want people to understand the geography in strange way to say it. In the school, I didn't want them to know how the hallways and the classrooms related to each other, to create this extra sense of claustrophobia. And we almost have no like big master shots. We look out of the window one time, so it was really about trapping the characters and the audience in this school.
And Renate, in terms of the scene where your character goes into that uncontrollable laughter, I know, you know, in the script originally, it was just, you know, she laughs uncontrollably for a long period of time. And when you asked, it was like maybe about 7 minutes, which is actually an incredible amount of time to have to do that. But what I love about that scene is the tipping point where it turns into tears, because I feel like those two emotions are so closely tied to each other. So when you were filming that scene and doing all those multiple takes, which is hugely impressive, by the way, how did you find that tipping point and that moment where you felt like actually now is where it's going to change from laughter into this completely other emotion?
that point was really hard, actually, because it's hard enough to laugh or go into something very vulnerable and cry in front of a bunch of people and finding that in yourself. But yeah, we spent 10 hours on that scene, and because we needed also the shots for everyone in that scene. But yeah, it was actually the only way was to actually lose control and actually be, and the body doesn't want to do that. So I was just got to a point where I was so exhausted that it kind of happened by itself, and then I could be free and being dynamic and be when we knew that we had it, kind of that we knew that we had a tipping point, then we could be more free and testing different versions. And then you also had, then in the editing, you had the possibilities because we did it so many times in different ways. Yeah.
I also wanted to ask you both a little bit about the two dance sequences in the film, and kind of starting with that first one where essentially Elizabeth is kind of pulling herself around by her hair to start with, and then moving in tandem with the janitor. And I love the way that's shot, because we're very much, once it's the two of them, we're kind of seeing them in shadow rather than direct light. And so I just wanted to ask both of you about the details in terms of how that flow came together, and what you really wanted to convey about the character in that moment.
That was one of the least scripted. It's the only thing actually in the film that's not so scripted, was that dance. It said like that she passes through swinging, but then Renate and the choreographer kind of made this, and it's also said that she was like dancing with the janitor a little bit, but it was supposed to be maybe like 40 seconds or something, and then Renate and the choreographer made it to a like 4-minute dance, and
Yeah.
and they showed it to me 5 days before shooting it, and I really just loved it, and I loved what you guys had, you know, done with the feeling of that scene, because it became it was not just a passing by anymore. It was like a fully immersive and very interesting scene that I'm in retrospect kind of has interpreted as, you know, her resurrection as a character. And I thought, you know, also at this point in the film, everybody's starting to lose their sense of reality and their sense of time, and that was also a really good timing to have this dance sequence where you really don't know what perspective you are looking on it from. And also with this dance, we could tell the audience from now on everything, you know, can happen. It created this warning of unpredictability that I found very good.
Yeah. I also love that scene because it opens up like you don't know where the film is going to go. It's very confusing in a way, so you kind of get into the state of the where the characters are. And it was also funny because the janitor, the guy who plays the janitor, he also doesn't want to rehearse. So the choreographer, she was very scared, but we're like, we'll be fine.
Yeah. I got a call from the choreographer. She was very stressed after they had their first rehearsal.
Yeah.
But all the details, I mean, I can't take any credits for the details in that dance sequence. It's really a lot of Renate's interpretation of the character and the state she's in. I guess I mentioned a little bit like maybe she's in a mental hospital or something. But you know, the pulling of the hair, I just absolutely love that stuff. So very good job.
No, it's such a great scene. And what was the difference in terms of the later dance scene? Because that's very different and has so many different interpretations. You know, you have that beginning where it's almost like the way that she's always being perceived and looked upon by everybody, and then everybody's kind of prodding at her and wants a piece of her, but also wants to attack her. And so you have all these different kind of layers to the narrative. And so how did you both figure out what's the story that we're really making sure that we tell in this moment?
Yeah, that was much more scripted, that scene. For me, it worked on primarily two levels. The first level was, you know, of course, like Elizabeth's perception of the world around her and how she felt, and you know, how she felt that people wanted, you know, a piece of her, which she kind of enjoyed in the beginning, but then it kind of tipped over to be more and more abusive and not okay anymore. And also this scene was a very like good visualization of the theme in the film. Where does the line between play and abuse go? Because in this scene we actually see where the line goes. At one point she wants to get out of the touching, but she isn't allowed, and there is the line crossed, and then it becomes a really abusive scene. So yeah.
Yeah.
And one of the things I think is so interesting about the ending of the film, Halfdan, is the fact that, you know, without giving away what happens in the conclusion, we don't hear that conversation, but actually at that point as an audience, we don't need to. And I think there's a lot of ways throughout this film in which you kind of understand where you need to give the audience something and where, you know, the subtext and the context is enough, such as Elizabeth's relationship that she had with her partner who passed away, where we don't know all the details, but we understand what that relationship was. And how did you feel like building those moments where you're holding things back throughout the film really played into being able to build that relationship of trust with the audience and to present the conclusion in the way that you did?
Yeah, that was it started with just like this idea of ending the film with 20 minutes of almost no dialogue, because we had so much dialogue the first 70 minutes, and I thought it was just a very cool idea actually to with a film with so much dialogue, ending it without any dialogue, and where the whole conclusion, the whole climax, everything happens almost like without any speech. And of course in the editing we were particularly aware of, for the rain scene to work, we needed to build, you know, the understanding of the film and the conflict so well that people actually understood kind of what's on stakes in the rain scene. And also I grew up with silent movies, watching it, you know, a little bit in my family, and I wanted to also make, you know, like this operatic kind of silent movie scene where it's just like expression, and it's very dramatic with the rain, and it's also very satirical in a way, because they're these adults being in the playground of the school, you know, choosing sides, which is what kids do. And so for me that rain scene was just like, it was just like this perfect operatic finale of that had, you know, all the elements that the film, you know, I tried to have in the film before. So yeah.
Yeah, it's such a kind of payoff to everything that you've built in the structure throughout the rest of the film, and you've both done such a fantastic job with this movie, so congratulations on that, and thank you so much for talking about it.
Thank you so much.
You had really good questions.
Really good questions and observations.
Yeah.
I'm super
Thank
impressed.
you.
It was very fun talking to you.
Yeah.